Special presentation of The Ultimate Gift has been brought to you in part to Prison Guard and Jimmy Stewart, the ex-con. Now they're after each other in Fool's Parade on the Friday night movie, tonight at 8 on Channel 11. Share the good times and the bad, the hopes and the fears. The Waltons, weekdays at 3:30 on Channel 11.
75, 75, 75, 75, 75, 75, $100 bill, $100 bill, $100 bill, $100 $100 $100 name, $100 name, $100 name, $100 name, $100 now, $100 now, $100 name, $100 name, $100 name, $100 name, $100 name, $125, $125, $125, $125, say $125, $100 $125, $125, $125, $100 bill, $25, $100 bill, $25, $125, $125,
Going broke, going broke, going broke, ain't no joke. All my dreams just turned to smoke. Going broke, I missed the boat. Now I'm hanging to a short thin rope. I'm going broke, they changed the locks. Going broke, they took my stock. No more future, no more hope. Everybody worried about going broke.
14-7, 14-6, 14-7. Anybody else? 14-7, 14-7. I sold it to you at $14,600. 76 is his number.
Last August, when we signed the assignment for the farm, the banker said this doesn't mean a thing. It's just to make the bank examiners feel better. But then we lost our farm because we signed the assignment. So it does mean something. And you have to be careful what you sign.
At least if I went through bankruptcy, I would still be able to feed my family, which was becoming a very difficult thing for the last few months. Either we had to make a choice with what little money we did have coming in, was either are we going to pay bills or are we going to buy groceries?
When my family confronted me, I could no longer hide the stuff that I was buying and bringing in, and they realized that I was doing something that was really crazy, and they confronted me, and at that point I was ready to do something about it, and that's why I'm in the spenders group.
It's just not Minnesota. It's all over the United States. It's a phenomenon that is just never been experienced by this country before. We are at all-time record high numbers of bankruptcy.
The word bankruptcy comes to us from ancient Roman law and the Roman custom of breaking the workbenches of merchants who could not pay their debt. Today we still use that language when we say someone is going broke. As we'll see in the next hour, a record number of Minnesotans are now finding themselves in bankruptcy court, and for a variety of reasons.
Since March 1981, all over Minnesota, people's tastes have been challenged in a unique taste test called the Pepsi Challenge. And you know what these people are saying?
Pepsi.
Pepsi.
Pepsi-Cola?
Pepsi's a thirst quencher.
I picked the best one, which was Pepsi. Pepsi is a little sharper, a little more snap to it.
And it's not just these Minnesotans who prefer Pepsi. Nationwide, more people prefer the taste.
Do you receive more bills and final notices and junk mail? Do you leave your phone off the hook to avoid calls from bill collectors? You can stop the agony of overdue bills by calling attorney Steve Goldfarb at 546-8888. The Goldfarb Law Firm practices in the areas of bankruptcy, divorce, DWI, personal injury, criminal defense, and Social Security appeals. The Goldfarb Law Firm is a small professional association in business since 1965. They can give you the personal attention, expertise, and understanding you deserve. Call 546-8888 for an appointment.
When you have bill collectors banging on your door day after day after day, I mean, you've got to give them something, and that left no money for food.
It's been a very bad year for Ralph and June Meidinger of Harris, Minnesota, and a daily struggle for them to support themselves and their 3 young children, Jason, Angela, and Jacob.
Jason? Jake, you want some crackers? Here you go. Come on. There you go. Eat your crackers now.
Last winter, Ralph seriously injured his right shoulder in a skating accident. Then in the spring, he was laid off his $18,000 a year maintenance job at a Minneapolis metal shop. The family got 4 months behind on their mobile home mortgage. Ralph's unemployment checks were not enough to cover the mounting medical and other bills. Overall, June and Ralph were nearly $20,000 in debt to a variety of creditors.
Did you want to see the bills?
And neither of them could find any work in the metropolitan area. When we first visited them, June was making a tent for the family to live in while they drove around the state looking for work.
There's different campsites, which would be kind of nice because then we could travel to different places and look for work. We've heard of some jobs possibly up north. I know there's not much, but there's some, like there's a cook in Collier, and that's my hometown. So I have an application in there, and then there's in Effie, Minnesota, there's a couple job openings there I'm trying for. So if one of us can get a job, it's better than nobody working. We always try the best to take care of the kids, and they're kind of worried about moving and leaving their friends, but we try to make it sound exciting for them, meeting new friends and moving and seeing different parts of the country maybe, and so we're hoping that they'll adjust to it.
Finally, in desperation, the Meidingers went to Twin Cities lawyer Jack Prescott, who advised them to file bankruptcy.
I look at it this way. If a person is, as he nears 1/2 year's income in debt, other than on his home, he's approaching a troubled situation. As he goes from 1/2 year to a full year in debt, he goes from a troubled situation to a desperate situation. And in nearly every case, if you're a full year in debt, you're a like subject probably for straight bankruptcy.
The federal bankruptcy court in St. Paul wiped out all of Ralph and June Meidinger's debts. They lost their mobile home and new car, but they will keep the furniture and other possessions. Meanwhile, the family has moved to Viking, Minnesota, where Ralph is working as a farmhand.
Because we filed for bankruptcy, you know, where I'm able to take the lower paying jobs. We don't need a $9 an hour job to survive anymore. And the lower paying jobs are a lot more plentiful than the others.
We've got the small house now, but I'm still working on the tent. Maybe we can use it for camping now.
St. Paul federal bankruptcy judge John Connolly says the right to a fresh start is guaranteed to all Americans.
We should remember that many of our earlier settlers came out of debtors' prisons in England that had been put there because they couldn't pay their debts, and their only escape was to be put on a boat and try to make a new living in America. It was such an important thing in our early history, this debtor's prison concept, that the fathers of this country provided in the Constitution for a system of bankruptcy. They didn't say there should be a bankruptcy court or bankruptcy laws. They just simply said there shall be a system of bankruptcy. And it's been there, and it's basically a relief system for people and businesses that are in financial troubles, and it really works.
Debtors' prisons were abolished over 100 years ago, and our bankruptcy laws have grown more compassionate towards the debtor. 4 years ago, Congress again reformed the Bankruptcy Act, creating 3 basic categories under which individuals, farmers, and businesses can seek debt relief. Twin Cities bankruptcy lawyer Jim Levy helped write those reforms and says they're working. The 3 common bankruptcy categories, Levy says, are Chapters 7, 11, and 13. Chapter 7 is straight bankruptcy. It involves liquidation of assets to pay creditors. In Minnesota, individuals going through Chapter 7 are allowed to keep certain property by choosing either state or federal exemptions. The state exemptions tend to favor homeowners, while renters are usually better off to file under federal exemptions.
Under the new exemption law, you can keep more, if you have assets, you can keep more of your assets away from your creditors than you could have under the old law. To that extent, it is less damaging to your, to the property that you own than it was under the old law.
The new Chapter 11 bankruptcy calls for a reorganization plan. Farmers and corporations can seek relief under Chapter 11, and their obligations to both secured and unsecured creditors can be modified. The law also gives creditors the right to petition a company for reorganization against its will. Basically, the intent of Chapter 11 is to salvage an enterprise and make arrangements with creditors to satisfy at least part of a business or farmer's debts.
As far as farmers are concerned, they cannot be the subject of an involuntary bankruptcy. The farmer has to come in voluntarily And a lot of farmers are filing Chapter 11s where they're trying to hold off their creditors until, hopefully, the values of their grain in storage or grain growing in the field or livestock or whatever they're growing will increase to the point where they can begin to realize money out of it, not only to pay their existing bills, but to take care of their overhead and their long-term debt. So a lot of farmer Chapter 11s. If it doesn't work, the ordinary Chapter 11, for a business, if it doesn't work, it can be converted into liquidation. But in a farmer, you can't do that. If it doesn't work, he gets dismissed, and he starts over again.
The third common form of bankruptcy is called Chapter 13. This is a court-supervised repayment plan for small businesses and individuals over an extended period of time. The debtor is given the exclusive right to propose the repayment plan.
Most people really want to pay their bills. And maybe they're not going to pay 100 cents on the dollar, but maybe they're going to pay 70 cents or 40 cents or whatever is appropriate. You can spread these over 5 years. That's the maximum. It gives you the protection of the bankruptcy court. Nobody can garnish your wages, repossess your automobile. You make an honest effort to pay the bills. We do have people who do that. There are quite a few Chapter 13s in force in Minnesota.
Chapter 7, straight bankruptcy. Chapter 11, reorganization bankruptcy. And Chapter 13, long-term repayment bankruptcy are the three most common types of filings. The small Oklahoma town of Wapanaka is going through a fourth type called Chapter 9. Chapter 9 cases are very rare because they involve entire municipalities going broke. Chapter 9 protects residents from being held individually accountable for the town's debt. Wapanaka is the first town in Oklahoma history to file for bankruptcy. So far, Minnesota has never had a Chapter 9 case.
Going broke, I got the blues. Time to put on my walking shoes. Going broke, I watch the news. Everybody say they got nothing to lose. They're going broke, some are going style. Some with a whimper, some with a smile. No more future, no more hopes. Everybody worry about going broke.
We are at all-time record high numbers of bankruptcies, and making allowances for increases of population and so forth. We're worse off now than we were in the Depression as far as number of bankruptcy cases that are being filed. Statistics of bankruptcy are just overwhelming. You can just see the progression of numbers. About 16% of those figures represent businesses that have actually gone through the bankruptcy court. Farmers, another individual category interesting in Minnesota. The numbers of bankruptcies there have quadrupled in the last 2 years. And I'm afraid that we're going to see even more than that in the coming years.
Statistics on personal bankruptcies across the nation show a steady increase from about 180,000 filings in 1978 to a record of more than 450,000 last year. Paralleling the rise in bankruptcies is a staggering accumulation of personal debt. Personal debt due to installment credit, home mortgages, and other obligations now amounts to more than $1.5 trillion. That's half again as much as the federal government owes. The average American's personal debt is nearly $7,000. Tens of thousands of people are seeking relief through Chapter 7 proceedings.
There's much said that bankruptcy is a fraud, it's a ripoff, why don't you pay your bills? But some of these people get into situations where they just can't pay bills.
One such family, the Sorensons of Champlin, Minnesota. Michael and Sheila Sorensen have a nice home in this northern suburb of the Twin Cities. There's plenty of room for their daughters Angela, Nicole, and Susan to play, and for Mike and Sheila to raise garden vegetables. Mike works at a nearby lumber yard. Sheila had worked as a production machine operator until an on-the-job injury forced her to quit 2 years ago. She's not been able to get workers' compensation so far to pay her medical bills. Meanwhile, the children have also had some medical problems, including a wrist operation for 9-year-old Nicole. With only Mike able to work, the Sorensens got swamped in bills. They owed $8,000 to hospitals and doctors and another $3,000 to other creditors. They decided to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy to save their home and wipe out the bills they felt they had no chance to pay.
Things have gotten a little easier once we filed bankruptcy because our bills were just too heavy for me to pay for them alone on just my salary. so we had no other choice.
We're able to keep the kids' clothes for school and food on the table, roof over our head, and that's about it. But without me working now, it makes it tough. But the bankruptcy has stopped a lot of the bill collectors and people calling wanting money and that we just didn't have. And at least now we can breathe a little easier.
Banks and other creditors claim they could recover at least 1/4 of their $6 billion annual losses to bankrupt debtors if the rules on Chapter 7 were tightened. The lenders want Chapter 7 filings restricted to those who can prove inability to make future repayments. And legislation that would make that change is under consideration by Congress. Eldon Spencer represents the Minnesota Consumer Finance Conference, a lobby group for the state's loan and thrift industry. Spencer says ability to repay a debt through future income should be considered, and he says this loophole is hurting the rest of society.
The fact is that when people are granting credit these days, or at least in the last few years, the basis that they grant credit on, if you or I went in to apply for credit, has tended to be your earnings capacity, what you're earning, and it really doesn't look too much at the asset side. Increasingly, with the change in the bankruptcy laws and with the failure of the law to require that the bankruptcy court take any look at the ability to repay out of earnings, creditors are looking to make their loans to people or businesses that have some collateral that they can put up as security. So the practical matter is that people who are young and don't have a great deal of assets built up, people who don't own their own homes so that they could put up the home as security for the loan, aren't able to get credit, or they're only able to get credit at higher rates than might otherwise be the case.
But Jim Levy opposes changing the Chapter 7 law for a variety of reasons.
And I think it's rather unworkable and would cause a tremendous flood of problems for the judge looking at each case and saying this man doesn't have to pay, this man's got to pay 10%, this man's got to pay 20%. You get all kinds of appeals. It's discriminatory. You're picking on this group or you're picking on that group or whatever. It's very difficult to have that kind of a scheme. It seems to me either you're going to get a discharge or you're going to file a voluntary Chapter 13.
But while that debate goes on, Chapter 13 remains a voluntary system in which only the debtor can propose a long-term plan for full or partial repayment. And Chapter 13 is being used increasingly by homeowners who can't meet contract for deed balloon payments or who get behind due to other mortgage problems. Last year, 65-year-old Dorothy Johnson bought $15,000 of new siding for her St. Paul home. It's a decision she regrets because the $267 a month payments are more than she can readily afford. Dorothy fell 5 months behind on the second mortgage which financed the siding, and a bank began to foreclose on her home. She showed St. Paul attorney Jeff Besikoff her problem and hired him to file a Chapter 13 repayment plan in Judge Connolly's court.
The bankruptcy court stayed the bank, in other words, prohibited the bank from foreclosing its mortgage on the house. She said that out of this meager income that she could make her first mortgage payment on the house, feed herself, take care of her utilities, and still scrimp out enough to pay the bank on that second mortgage for that siding job that she got conned into on the house.
Besikoff is investigating the siding deal, but says in the meantime his client is being protected by the bankruptcy law.
If it were not for the filing of the Chapter 13 petition and its approval by the court, Mrs. Johnson would not be sitting here in her home as the owner of it at this point in time.
Dorothy Johnson's repayment plan gives her little money left for luxuries and even some necessities, but she's determined to pay her bills.
Sometimes it's kind of rough, but
Business failures in the state are up 43% over last year. That's about the same increase as the national average.
Bankruptcies deal with all segments of our society, from the unemployed miners, other workers in our state, laboring force, to cases such as Braniff Airlines, the latest, largest, and Wixom Company out in California.
The function of this office is to appoint the
individual case trustees who handle the liquidation of the debtor's assets in bankruptcy cases.
William Westfall is United States trustee for Minnesota, North and South Dakota. He says bankruptcies in business are caused by a combination of factors, but the prolonged recession and high interest rates are the two critical problems now.
We had a case where a company that had been in business for 60, 70 years here in Minnesota found that its interest costs had gone from $8,000 per month to $40,000 per month as the prime rate went up. That business had no way of passing on to its customers an additional $32,000 each month, and so this high interest rate was one very important factor in that company going out of business.
Often there is no hope of financial recovery, so the bankrupt goods and assets are sold to the highest bidder. This summer, a 4-day auction was held at Arctic Enterprises in Thief River Falls. Arctic used to be one of the biggest industries in northwestern Minnesota and once one of the world's leading snowmobile manufacturers. Last winter, Arctic was $50 million in debt and filed for a Chapter 11 reorganization. The auction was held to help pay off all those debts, and the company hopes to continue to survive as a manufacturer of aluminum and fiberglass boats. Company officials blamed their bankruptcy on the bad economy, winters of light snow, and poor business planning.
$6.75 twice anymore.
Furniture Barn also went bankrupt recently under Chapter 11. The Twin Cities-based company was over $5 million in debt. Officials blamed their failure on the poor economy, high interest charges, and excessive debt.
In 2.5 years, lost $500,000 in the furniture business.
Leonard Gephardt's family started a furniture business in suburban Lakeville in 1895. It lasted through many good and hard years, including the Depression of the 30s. But Gephardt could not survive our current recession and sold out this year. He faces foreclosure on his building next year unless he can pay off his creditors. But he's determined to avoid bankruptcy. It's a matter of pride.
I wouldn't consider bankruptcy under any circumstances. All the debts that we have are perfectly legitimate. And the companies and people we owe them to, there's no reason we don't pay them. We could liquidate right now and pay everybody, but we're not in a seller's market. See? We'd have got out of the furniture business a year ago, but it took a year to find a buyer. And at $20,000 plus a month loss, that's a hell of a loss. But we will go out honorably, one way or the other.
Gephardt is selling out to a firm that promises to keep longtime employees like Goldie DeGrosse.
I'm sad that things have turned out the way they've had and that we have to change hands.
Another employee with 20 years of service to the Gephardts is Larry Johnson.
Since the sale has started, there's been ladies come in with tears in their eyes. They've bought all their furniture at Gephardt's, and now there isn't going to be a Gephardt's anymore. So they feel real bad about it.
Even Gephardt's son, Leonard Jr., will have a job with the new owner, but he will not inherit the store, and that's very disappointing to his father. Gephardt blames much of his loss on the new bankruptcy laws.
See, we've been getting a couple of bankruptcy notices a week on an average. Some of them are small, 100, 200 bucks. Some are 1,500, 2,000, 3,000. But for some reason, they liberalized the bankruptcy laws. Now, I can see if a guy he's married and got a wife and family and doctor bills and everything, that's fine. But you get into businesses like ours, where certain items he needs, but a lot of stuff he doesn't need. The lawyer convinces him that he don't pay for any of it. See? We'll keep it for you because your TV set and your bed and your kitchen table and so forth, I think, are exempt. Our normal procedure is to I go to a lawyer and we call the referee in bankruptcy. And we say, okay, the guy just bought this stuff a few months ago. It's practically new. Authorize a release, we'll go out and pick it up. But they don't. Even a referee in bankruptcy is usually on the side of the guy that goes bankrupt. So he knows that there's a 6 to 8 month stall period in there, or by that time they've beat my merchandise up pretty good, figuring they might lose it anyway. I do have a security interest, but until a referee in bankruptcy follows all the government routine, I can't touch anything.
The business just is not fun. It's not enjoyable anymore as it once was. As the credit gets higher and the dollar gets tighter, people get crabbier.
Keith Hoffeld is selling out his hardware business in St. Paul after 10 years of ownership. Not only are his customers crabbier, they are stingier, too. Hoffeld's business has declined sharply in the past 2 years. He laid off 5 of his 9 employees and cut back operating costs. But even with the toughest belt-tightening measures, his store lost $40,000. If the closeout sale does not empty all of his shelves and pay off all of Hoffeld's bills, he may be forced into a bankruptcy condition he accepts with a wry sense of humor.
It's ridiculous. Sorry, but it is. That's that point.
We have had as many as 65 people. In 1975, we had 65 people handling about 225 accounts. With this change in administration and the depression or recession, we're down to about 35 active accounts. 100 of them have just disappeared. The phones don't ring. We don't know whether they're bankrupt, disappeared, or what.
Ed Johnson has owned and operated a graphic arts printing business in Minneapolis since 1951. He says he's never seen business conditions this bad. Johnson is confident his business will survive, but only after taking drastic steps, including a greatly reduced workforce and the elimination of his employee pension program. Johnson has $750,000 worth of sophisticated print equipment sitting idle much of the time. His business survives on long-term accounts for advertising and special photography. Even among some of his best customers, Johnson has trouble getting paid on time, and he's been a victim of many bankruptcies.
A customer of ours went into a Chapter 11, owed us $33,000. And they had a great deal of work, but they were pinched and couldn't get anyone to produce it. So we were one of the major suppliers, became part of the court action. And we continued to do work with them, did another $12,000. Well, then they were having more difficulties. Now we're being paid $500 a month on the $12,000 that we incurred after the Chapter 11, and there's no hopes for the 33 that we can see.
Mike Marone and Monty Olson recently opened this muffler shop in St. Paul. And unlike many small businesses, they are making money. They credit their success to the right combination of technical skills, low prices, low overhead, and a tightly managed accounting system.
When it comes to experience, we both got a lot of experience and background in exhaust systems. But when it comes to the shop, I'm basically in charge of the shop, and he's in charge of the office and things like that because of his experience with school.
All the way through when I was working there, I went to school. I'm an accounting major, so I got a pretty good idea. I know what break-even point is and capital budgeting, projecting sales, and stuff like that. We've got that all down on paper, and we got some advice from people who've been in the business for quite a few years, too.
Marone and Olson seem to have the right combination of training, market appeal, and management skills to survive. George Somweber of the Small Business Administration counsels people starting new businesses, and he says good management is the key to avoiding bankruptcy.
Our studies at SBA, the studies done in Bradstreet, and other business accounting organizations indicate that 90% of all small business failures are a direct result of poor management.
It's often said that a business fails because of bad management. I don't think that's necessarily true in our economy today, or we just have been ravaged by high unemployment, or not so much high unemployment, but high interest rates, a terrible rate of inflation, and businesses just cannot borrow money at today's going rates and expect to use that money in their business to make a profit. It's just been a terrible load for them.
Recently, interest rates have begun to drop, and that should ease the pressure on many businesses. But ironically, if the business climate improves, the personal bankruptcy rate is likely to increase even more.
And it's been my experience and other slack periods that once the worker goes back to work, the creditors find out about it, again attack him. They'll come back into my office and the office of other attorneys, one jump ahead of a garnishment or one jump behind a garnishment, and then we take care of them.
Foreclose on a poultry farmer in the Cambridge area. He lost it all, the farm, machinery, and the chickens. There were 30 farm bankruptcies at the beginning of the year, but that's expected to double, triple, or go even higher by the end of the year. One researcher has predicted that hundreds of farms will be lost by next spring. The economic sickness on the farm has spread to the towns where merchants have fewer customers who are buying less. And businessmen who need the farmer are taking more risks.
We carry more accounts than what we should, way more. And this is really, we kind of lay ourselves out, but we've always dealt with the farmers, which I feel are the most honest people in the world. The old theory, or the older farmers, their word was their bond. We're finding now that we're getting ourselves in a little jam because we are finding farmers who come in and we work with them hard, same as we did with the older ones, and now all of a sudden, bankruptcy, and we're out. But we've seen the small farmers moving out a little bit, the small family farms, which are, in my opinion, the most efficient, moving to corporate farms or larger farmers buying the small acreages and keeping that going. But what it's doing to the rural communities is just taking their customers right away from them.
I think it's at a crisis situation. I don't think that's exaggerating. I know there are a lot of variables, but in terms of the necessity to have some improvement before we deteriorate to an irreversible position truly identifies it as a crisis condition in the rural community. We will lose the rural community as we know it in this nation today. And my fear is that we will set ourselves in a pattern where that's irreversible before we're willing to admit that it's happening, or before we will recognize the serious impact it has on every one of us. Gil, we simply cannot afford to lose the rural community of the United States. And under the present pattern, we're going to, whether you call it lose it or change it, we're going to destroy that rural community as the viable part of our economy and our society that it's been since the birth of this nation. Now, it is that serious.
About 2,000 Minnesota farmers and ranchers have lost their farms. Debtors were sent to prison and even subjected to public humiliation. But in the 20th century, the shame attached to bankruptcy is rapidly fading away.
So the social stigma it's still there to a certain extent, and in certain areas of the state more so than others. But in the metropolitan areas, the stigma that attached to bankruptcy one time is no longer there.
It took me several years to build up a nice gun collection. Well, I had to turn around and sell them so we could eat. And having to go through bankruptcy does dampen the pride some.
At times you think back, well, did you do the right thing or didn't you? I mean, who knows yet? I mean, I just didn't want a lawsuit against us where it would have been tied up for you guy couldn't have did nothing for the rest of your life either.
A lot of our friends have asked us about it, and we've told them the lawyer we've gone to. A lot of our friends have even gone and filed bankruptcy now. And it's nothing to be ashamed of anymore with the bills that we had and stuff. And a lot of people, that's their only way out. And that was our only way out.
Judge Connolly warns that while it's less painful to file bankruptcy, it's still a drastic measure and should not be rushed into.
I said earlier that the Constitution of the United States provides this right. It's a right that every American has, but it's a right in the form of a remedy to help yourself out of financial problems. Now, the forefathers and the congressmen of this country were not so dumb as not to see that this is a relief that could be abused, and so there's a limitation put on the number of times that you can file bankruptcy. You can only file bankruptcy once every 6 years. So it's not something that you can, you should sort of treasure it, because keep it in the background as a ace in the hole in case the roof really does fall in on you.
What I'm afraid of, and what I'm certainly seeing more and more of, and statistics will bear me out, is more and more people who really don't need a bankruptcy are turning to bankruptcy as, quote-unquote, the easy way out.
Wensley says he thinks part of the problem goes back to the end of World War II, when the American dream of plenty was nourished by easily available jobs and bigger paychecks, a habit that's hard to break.
They're still living as if the raises are coming through every year. They're living as if their dollar is going to buy them more every year. But the fact of the matter is that the raises are not coming through, that the dollar consequently is buying less each and every year. They can go in and file a bankruptcy, and that will relieve them of their debt, but the basic underlying problem is still there. Their spending patterns haven't changed at all. The way they deal with money, the way they deal with their finances in toto has not changed at all. So that individual, by filing a bankruptcy, has not gotten at his root problem at all, and really runs a very high risk of having to file a bankruptcy again.
And the compulsive buying gets worse rather than better. That's what happened in my case. It got to the point where I couldn't hide it from my family anymore. They finally confronted me on it, and I was, at that time, for some reason, was ready to deal with the problem.
And when I think of how I've hidden and lied and said I got things on sale that I didn't, or marked those sales, take the sales ticket and put $12 on there in red, and then mark that out and put another one, that's really kind of sick.
Spenders Anonymous is a self-help organization where men and women turn to each other to solve a common problem, compulsive spending. It's an addiction that actually produces a high, but also an emotional illness that can destroy a person or a family.
I think that the buying does satisfy some emotional needs, but not enough. But that's why it becomes compulsive, is that it only satisfies it a little bit for a short period of time, and you keep doing it over and over again and trying to get the satisfaction that never really comes.
And for me, it had nothing to do with being financially in debt, but it's like I was being controlled by something outside of myself. I wanted to be free and just to live and to breathe and to enjoy what was going on instead of thinking about all the goodies I can buy, or this. It's like all my possessions possessed me. I didn't have them.
Admitting that compulsive spending is an illness is the first step towards recovery, and the only requirement for membership in Spenders Anonymous is a desire to stop spending, and it works.
And so by not shopping at all, by abstinence, just buying what I need to buy, making a list or knowing what's okay to buy, and not the extra stuff, it's a much more peaceful way of living.
Be sure you have a comprehensive business plan, a comprehensive forecast, and all the profit and loss forecasts and the cash flow projections, so you can say, this is what I think I need.
Arnold Thielman is one of several retired business people volunteering advice and assistance to new or existing businesses. This service corps of retired executives, or SCORE, provides free and confidential counseling in areas such as sales, advertising, financial analysis, record keeping, and inventory control. Most business people agree that in today's economy, good management is essential to keep from going broke.
If you have the determination and the knowledge and the expertise and the willingness to sacrifice your home life, your time, your boat, your extracurricular activities for your business, you're going to make it. I don't care if you're selling hamburgers or fixing lapel jackets or whatever you may be doing, but it's going to get done, and it's going to be a profitable business. But it takes that one piece of advice, counseling.
The state of the economy is the #1 issue today. It affects us all. We asked a lot of people what has to be done to make it better and when it'll get better. We got a lot of different answers. Builders and buyers want the interest rates to come down. Farmers want more markets. The out of work just want jobs. Economists can't even agree on whether we're in a recession or a depression, or whether the economy is heading up or down. One local business leader said that his greatest fear is that as a people we will lose confidence. He said belief will help bring about a turnaround, and that seems to echo the faith of Elizabeth Carlston, the farm wife near Miltona who has lost her home. She said simply, "It will pass." I'm John Bachman. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Going broke, going broke, going broke, ain't no joke. All my dreams just turned to smoke. Going broke, I missed the boat. Now I'm hanging to a short, thin rope. I'm going broke, they changed the locks. Going broke, they took my stock. No more future, no more hope. Everybody worried about going broke. Going broke, I got the blues. Time to put on my walking shoes. Going broke, I watch the news. Everybody say they got nothing to lose. They're going broke, some are going style. Some with a whimper, some with a smile. No more future, no more hopes. Everybody worried about going broke. Everybody worried about going broke. Going broke, I'm going broke. Going broke, I'm going broke. Going broke, I'm going broke. Everybody worried about going broke. Going broke, I'm going broke. Going broke, I'm going broke. Going broke, I'm going broke. Everybody worried about 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 going